and taste. Sweet. Sour. So good to taste.
So this is great taste, and I'm really happy to be visiting with you. We're talking with Danielle Alvarez, who's the chef at Fred's in the inner city Paddington neighborhood of Sydney, Australia. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And Danielle grew up in Florida, and she also worked at a number of restaurants in the States before moving to Australia. She worked at the French Laundry, preparing eggs, and as an intern.
That's it.
right. But you also worked at Chez Panisse, one of the most famous restaurants, one of the most iconic restaurants in the United States.
Yep.
Yeah. And you've been in Australia since what, 2016?
Yeah, 2000. Is that right? No, 2014. Sorry.
2014.
We opened Fred's in 2016, but it took about 2 years to get it open.
Okay, got you. Yeah. And was it a big transition? I mean, I have no idea. I've never been to Australia. I want to go to Australia, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, a lot of like the obvious things are exactly the same. So, you know, I speak the language. Culturally speaking, there isn't too much that's different. In terms of fruit and vegetables, a lot of it is exactly the same. Although it's hard to find a lot of the variety that I was using in California. But, you know, there's like any different country, there's some subtle cultural differences. And the seafood is completely different to anything that I was using in California or in Florida where I grew up. So I think getting used to that and just getting used to feeling humble about things and being really observant and just starting from zero in a lot of places was helpful. So it was kind of good that I had those 2 years before the restaurant opened to acclimate, I guess, and form a lot of relationships with the farms that we buy from in the restaurant.
So I neglected to mention something extremely important, and that is Danielle's the author of the new book, Always Add Lemon. You have it too. Okay, good. Excellent. And Always Add Lemon recipes you want to cook, food you want to eat. And believe me, the photographs in this book make you want to just like jump into the page because they're so, I mean, really just divine. And the book itself is just a delight. So I really want to talk to you a lot about numerous things in it. I want to start out by just reading one thing that you wrote in the introduction because it warmed my heart, and it's just who I, like to think that I am when it comes to food too. So you say in the introduction, now the last bit I want to say before you progress to the recipes, I believe in the power of food and cooking and the joy it can bring to our lives. In the words of Michael Pollan, eating is a political act, and the way we grow our food, I'm starting to tear up. The way we grow our food, the way we buy what we eat, dictates the kind of society we live in. Please pass your love of cooking and the traditions you create on to your children. They are our future.
Oh,
beautiful. Really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I really... I think so much food and cooking in restaurants, it's all about like just pure joy, right? Like stepping out of our lives. It's a place for escape. And, restaurants, especially in the US, are not open in a lot of places. And so I'm sure people are really missing that escape, but you can also have that at home. You can feel true nourishment. And I fully believe that, like, obviously working at Chez Panisse instilled a lot of that political side of what food can do in me. But I've seen it proven time and time again throughout my life, like cultures that love food, that appreciate good, healthy, nourishing food, have people that are healthy as part of their societal systems. And it's just a happier place to be. And, I really feel like we're not all here for that long. And so better to be healthy and happy while we're here. So anyways, that's just the baseline of everything.
Sure.
But the book ultimately is quite lighthearted. I think there's a lot of content and stories and recipes, but I just more want to inspire people to get into the kitchen, to, maybe use something you've never used before. You can still support your farmers if you have access to that wherever you are, and make delicious food.
Mm-hmm. Could you explain to us a little bit about, because you're Cuban American, and
Yep.
I'm sure that that's informed the way not only you cooked before now, but even in Australia, I'm sure it informs how you cook there.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you could just tell us a little bit about how that has made you the type of person and cook you are, because I think that's very important. It's not just the cook, but the person. And
That's right.
maybe a little bit about your grandmother, Aida, also.
Yeah, yeah. So, I don't cook Cuban food in my professional life. And it's actually something that it's quite personal to me, Cuban food. So I don't even really there's not too many recipes in here, although there's some glimpses of that Cuban food background. But what it did do for me was a bit of an ethos around inviting people in, inviting people to a table, generosity. Like there's always food for 20, even if you're serving for 10. And I grew up watching my grandmother and my mom cook food for people, and they exuded love through their cooking. So my grandmother, especially Ida, she always had something bubbling away on the stove, and people would drop into her house because this was still the days where people would drop in. And she'd always have something at the ready to, warm up or, serve with a little cocktail or something like that. She was just amazing. And I remember being amazed by her. A lot of the cooking that I did as a kid, and probably the reason why I wanted to become a chef was with her. We also used to watch these old TV programs with the hotel chefs that wore the big toque hats and stuff,
Right.
And I just remember both of us watching it so astutely. And then we'd go off, and one day I remember in particular, she said, what should we make today? And we had just watched one of these French chefs make crepes. And I was so blown away that she just whipped out a few ingredients, whipped out a pan and started making crepes. I couldn't believe that was something she could do. I thought she had superpowers. So she really inspired me a lot. And sadly, she's not with us anymore, but that memory of her and that love of cooking, I think definitely inspired me to take it on professionally.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love the way that the book, it's always something for me to look at when I see how books are laid out and who they're dedicated to. And I noticed, that your book was dedicated to your mother and to your late brother. And to me, that informs me again more about the person, who it is behind the book. So if you might just spend a moment just talking about why you dedicated it to them.
Well, my mom, absolutely, because she is one of the most inspiring people of my life. I think she, more than anyone, conveys this feeling of love through food that I really aspire to share. And, it's funny, I think I do, people that come into the restaurant or that come to my house, my close friends or whatever, I think some of them get that feeling and they appreciate it and they say it. And to me, that's just the ultimate compliment, is they can feel the love in the food, the love given through the food. So my mom, number one, and my brother, who passed away just a couple months before we opened Fred's 4 years ago, lost a battle to cancer, he's someone that I think about every single day. Everything I do, I dedicate to him. And after that experience of seeing someone so young lose their life, I feel like it's my responsibility to do everything now to the best of my ability and to just do everything, take on every opportunity in life that I have, because I'm so aware that not everyone will get them, or we're not guaranteed to be here tomorrow. So I hope that wherever he is, he's looking down and is proud of me, and that I'm sure he is, and I miss him terribly. So that's that dedication. Yeah.
So one of the things that you just mentioned, I was going to head in a different direction, but you just mentioned this element of the heart, and you have there's a little section in the book about women in the kitchen, and that you always get asked all the time, oh, what's it like being a woman in the kitchen? And it's kind of weird. I mean, I'm a guy, right? Okay, so I never thought, but I love food, and I never have thought about it that much in terms of the difference in the way that I think many people do in terms of gender, male, female, brigade system, French, women, all that kind of cultural and historical background type of thing. But I've looked at it a slightly different way. And I just want to kind of throw it out to you and just, it's obviously overgeneralized, but I just love to get your impression on it. And that is that in my experience, and it's not that, and I know you said you've worked for a lot of great men too, but in my experience of eating out all over the world, I've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to do that in many places. Almost every great meal that I've had was cooked by a woman. And I look at it as just the fact that, as a man, I'm continually trying to be more in touch with my emotional side instead of my intellectual side. And I look at, women who were, say, generalized as being more in touch with their emotional side than their intellectual side. But I actually see them as being much more balanced, actually, than men. So in general. And so that's why I think these meals, they have the sharpness of an intellect behind them and the ripe emotion of somebody who actually is feeling what they're doing. And that is not to say anything about a man in the kitchen. It's only to say what my experience has been and why I kind of feel that it makes sense to me that would be my experience, that those meals that have been elevated above the best have simply been because a woman has been there and she is more in touch, or she has been very much in touch emotionally with that food.
Well, I mean, that's a very interesting and well thought out point. I guess, in my position, I don't want to overanalyze why I think that might happen as well. I mean, I agree with you, though. I think some of my favorite meals out have been cooked by women. And I think there always is a slightly different sense about the food than men. But I don't want to pigeonhole it either. I don't want to say like men cook this way and women cook that way, because I think there's examples of variation on either side of that. But I like that point around being connected with the emotional and intellectual sides of things. Because, I mean, that is how I try to do it too. It's never about let me show you what I can do. It's more, let me show you how good this is. And that good thing being something really simple, grown by people who care about it, in the dirt. And that it's never about me. It's more about the food.
Do you know this theory that's people have debunked a million times about the 10,000, you have to do something 10,000 times in order to
be an expert.
Be an expert, right. But I think that people have made enough of it to know that not everybody's going to be Michael Jordan and not everybody's going to be Danielle Alvarez in the kitchen, no matter how many times they do it, especially me, neither. I'm not going to be Michael Jordan nor Danielle Alvarez. but I'm wondering, when it comes to elevating your skill, do you feel like there is something that is innate in your particular personality and that you've noticed in other people too? It's not like, in other words, anybody can have technique, but there has to be something else that's part of the soul that's approaching it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can give anyone a recipe and ask them to follow it. And if it's a good recipe, you'll end up with a good result. But I think to be, and by the way, thank you for putting my name in the same sentence as Michael Jordan. That's probably the last time in the world that's ever going to happen. I think if you really wanted to become an expert at something, you almost have to be a little bit obsessed. And in my life, I have always been obsessed with cooking. I mean, it's what I do when I'm at home. It's obviously what I've chosen to do for work. I read cookbooks like they're novels. I, obsess about minor details. So, I think there's a difference. If you want to just do something as a hobby, and please do, because we all need food and we all need people to cook at home. But if you want to be like the world's great chef. And by the way, I am absolutely not. And I'm still learning every single day, which is also what I love about doing what I do. You have to really like dedicate yourself to it pretty much completely. That's what I think anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to the book, because
let's talk about the book.
Hold it up again.
Hold it up again. Here. Yeah. Okay. There we go.
All right. So I would be remiss if I didn't let you just go through what's the lemon thing, and then we'll move on.
Okay, the lemon thing is I put lemon on almost everything, not everything, and not every recipe in the book does have lemon, just full disclosure. But it's one of the things that I put on, like, so here in the restaurant, as the dishes leave the kitchen, a lot of the food just gets a little squeeze of lemon over the top. And I'm constantly like checking and making sure that it happens, because to me, sometimes it is that little step which creates something that is, maybe a bit flat and makes, with the addition of a little brightness of acidity, be it lemon or lime or vinegar or something, really makes it sing. So that's my little tip around food and cooking, and hence the name of the book.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So I started on this a few minutes ago, and then got moved into a tangent. But I want to go back now and look at some different aspects of the book. And there's not, I'd love to spend hours talking with you about it, but obviously you and I both don't have that much time, especially you.
Yeah.
So you're already at work. And what
Yes.
time is it there in Australia?
So it's about probably 9:15 in the morning on Saturday morning here.
Right, Saturday morning. And you've been there before 9:15, I'm sure.
I've been here before, and I was here late last night. Yes. So I apologize for the bags under my eyes.
No, it's great. So in the part about ingredients, one of the things one of the ingredients you mentioned is salt. And I think this is a really key point, because I think most people don't realize that there's salt and then there's salt. So if you could help them a little bit, help everybody.
Yeah, like to me, the iodized salt and all the stuff, what is it, Morton's? I'm forgetting. But, that stuff has its own flavor. Like if you tasted it on its own, and I have, and no, I don't recommend having a spoonful of salt, but it almost has a bit of like a chlorine-y sort of chemical taste. And I don't feel like that does anything good for your food. So I very much stick to natural sea salts. I use fine salt and I use a flaky salt. And in Australia, we're quite lucky to have some beautiful pink called Murray River salts. So it's flaky. It's kind of like fleur de sel, which is a French salt. And that I use in almost everything, also for finishing things. But I definitely think stick to something all natural sea salts, and it will improve your cooking just on that alone.
And if I'm just going to throw in one other thing, which is just because of it's something that kind of is a pet peeve of mine, and that is that these salts that you're talking about, these natural sea salts, have a lot of minerals that are also a part of them. So they're not strictly certainly they're mostly sodium chloride, but they're a whole food in and of themselves. And it's a completely different experience, not only, as Danielle says, taste-wise and what they do to your food, but also the way the body reacts to them. So salt has gotten, I think it's gotten short shrift by the medical profession. And the reason is that because everybody's used to pouring their foods just saturated with processed salt. So that's the problem. So
good point. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So next, I thought in the essential part, there were two things that stood out to me in there too. The breadcrumbs. So I'd love for you to talk about the breadcrumbs and also the salsa verde.
Okay, so breadcrumbs are something that I find infinite uses for. And I think it's funny because it's something so simple, but I've seen chefs do it a million different ways. And I kind of, it's a good test for me to see how a chef thinks. Do you dry out the bread first and then grind it up? Do you toast it in whole big pieces and then mix it? Do you fry it with lots of oil? Do you toast it dry and then add oil? A lot of different possibilities. I like to fry it in a pan or with lots of oil, toasted in the oven. And this, I put this a lot on pastas. I think it adds that beautiful textural crunch. I also add it in salads a lot of the time because, again, it's all about that texture, and it's just more a vehicle to get more olive oil into things, which I could literally drink olive oil, so I love it. Yeah, I find a lot of things that I want to sprinkle heavily oiled toasted breadcrumbs on. Yeah.
And salsa verde.
And salsa verde. So salsa verde is the thing that I turn to a lot. Sometimes when I'm making just a simple dinner, whether it be like a piece of fish and some vegetables, I'll just steam something like that or roast it in the oven and make salsa verde. And that can turn it into something really bland and average, and then turn it into something really incredible. So I have a lot of different variations for salsa verde. My basic one is with herbs, shallots soaked in vinegar, and some chopped capers. So that is, to me, it's almost like a herby vinaigrette. So if we're going back to this idea of adding acidity to things to really brighten them, this is that next level. And the addition of the herbs just, creates incredible flavor. But I have additions of anchovies, which I adore. You can add mustard into your salsa verde, smoked paprika if you want to take it in a different direction, and breadcrumbs as well. So breadcrumb salsa verde is one of my favorite things to do, especially if you're making something quite soft and it needs a bit of brightness and texture. It's excellent on that.
So most of us as home cooks, or many of us as home cooks, tend to use recipes, especially if we're baking, but also, more than inspiration, a lot of people feel like they have to have a recipe in order to get by in the kitchen. What I loved in reading your book was that you said using recipes is just the beginning. And from there are really 3 things that you need to incorporate, and then you can do just about anything. And I'd love it if you could elaborate a little bit on that. Those were seasoning, layering flavors, and mastering heat. Those were the 3 things that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think, my good friend, Samin Nosrat, I think really nailed that on the head with her incredible book, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. So I can't explain it any better than she does in that book. But essentially, I think those are the basics of great cooking, is knowing how to adjust and use heat for the outcome that you want to achieve. So like if you want something really delicate and soft, you have to use a low, delicate heat. If you're braising something, for example, to me, it's such a simple concept, but I forget that for a lot of people, it's hard to understand. You're not trying to cook something to a done temperature. You're trying to cook it well beyond that done temperature to be able to have certain things break down and soften. I use fire a lot in our restaurant. So understanding the fire of a grill, it can be used really delicately and softly, but it also can be really hot, intensely searing something. So that's one element of it. The seasoning element is basic. I very much adhere to the rule of season at every step. And things like seasoning large cuts of meat, for example, you want to do that well in advance, sometimes 24 hours in advance. Like the pork shoulder, there's a recipe for a cheddar pork shoulder in the book with a crispy crackling skin. And, that you'd want to season 24 or 48 hours in advance. Which is not just essential for seasoning the meat, but for creating that crackling crust. And layering in the flavors, like seasoning, is the same thing. You have to, if you're building, let's say, a braise, I'll just come back to that, or a pasta sauce, you want to start by really sweating those mirepoix ingredients to the point where they start bringing out their sweetness. If you tasted that sauteed mirepoix at every step of the way, you're going to taste something very, very different. The beginning, it's going to be quite intense and almost kind of overpowering with onion. And then as it cooks, just like you caramelize onions, they start to break down and turn really, really sweet. And a lot of times that is what is going to contribute more to the final dish. So there's a lot of I think little things you can do along the way, but recognizing that some things take time and it's not as quick as you want it to be, but the results are going to be amazing,
And would you just define mirepoix for everybody, please?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Mirepoix is, in the classic French sense, is celery, carrots, and onion. So like a lot of pasta sauces, a lot of braises start with that, the Holy Trinity. But a lot of different cultures have their own variations. So like in Cuban culture, we call it sofrito, and it's red bell peppers, onion, garlic, and tomato. So yeah, you can use a lot of different things.
Great. I don't remember seeing a cookbook in quite a long time, if I ever have, and I'm certainly I could have missed this, that had 2 recipes for celeriac in it, and and I love celeriac. Gosh. So I hope maybe you could tell people a little bit why they should think about using celeriac.
Well, I mean, I think it's one of those incredible ingredients that delivers a lot on flavor, and especially in the winter months where things can get a little bit bleak. So I have a recipe for a beautiful shaved celeriac and pear salad with walnuts, with just a simple vinaigrette, and then also likewise a celeriac schnitzel. So, obviously it's very versatile, and I think it feels meaty, delivers a lot of flavor in a way that some other vegetables don't. And I actually think it's one of those vegetables where, something like tomatoes, I'd always want to get from a farmer's market because they're always going to be better than the things I get at the supermarket. But celeriac, I think, can be very consistent wherever you get it. So if you find it, it's probably going to taste like the same celeriac you'd get somewhere else. And yeah, I adore it just simply roasted, shaved in a salad, like I was just saying. And the schnitzel is a great recipe because you just kind of steam it a little bit to finish cooking it, crumb and fry it, and it feels like you're eating a piece of meat somehow. It's that satisfying.
Well, I am definitely looking forward to that because my wife's vegetarian.
Oh, great.
And so
there you go.
Yes, and I wanted to, I looked at trying to replicate Noma's version of the gyro, right?
Yes.
Right. And I said, oh yeah, that's not happening.
No, well, you know what? I actually had the great fortune of trying that dish a couple summers back. Yeah, when they were doing the vegetable season. And what's interesting is that big one that they bring out to show to everyone is not the one that they serve you on the plate.
Oh.
So I think it's a bit of a visual one, but it's still incredibly complex to make. So it's a lot of very, very thin layers of celeriac roasted, right. And they put the most incredible sauce. Like it had black truffle, and I just remember thinking they put a pot of it in the middle of the table with a spoon, and I was just mopping up the sauce. It was incredible.
I love the insider secrets. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, two more recipes and just a couple of other things because I know you're busy. These are the two other ones that stood out to me that I just absolutely went crazy. Tomato, onion, and cheddar tart. I just was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that was actually inspired by a good friend of mine. His name is Marty Bowitz, and he was one of the first farmers that I connected with when I came to Sydney. And he doesn't anymore, but at the time he had a company where he was gathering produce from different small farmers in the region that he was in and bringing them into Sydney into restaurants. And so he's a great friend. And I cooked with him once at his beautiful farmhouse, and he made the most gorgeous little starter of a sweet onion tart. And the recipe for the pastry and the filling came from his mom. And I think they're German backgrounds. And anyways, he graciously gave me the recipe, and I've adapted it with a few little additions and things here and there to include tomato and cheddar. But it's a flaky sour cream pastry and essentially a custard with sweet onions, tomato, and a bit of cheddar on top. And it's a real winner, that one.
Okay. And the third one, potato rolls.
Oh, potato rolls. Yeah. I mean, I personally don't think you can get too much better than what are the ones that you get at the shop? I forget the brand. Anyways, I grew up on those potato rolls, and these aren't quite those, but they're delicious. And I think they have a really nice flavor of potato. So you boil the potatoes whole in their skins, and then you reserve some of the mashed potato, but you also reserve the water that you cook the potatoes in, and that is what you make the potato rolls with. So they're soft, they're squishy, they're not hard to make. And I think especially like, if you're making some bread rolls around the holidays, they hold really well. So even if it's a small gathering this year, you can have them for breakfast the next morning with a bit of butter. And yeah, it tastes like a little potato.
So many people at home use pasta. It's kind of a go-to for quick meals. And you say that the difference between great and okay is all in the technique. How a pasta comes together just before it is served has a lot to do with it. So could you just shed a little bit of light on that for us?
Yeah. I think, a lot of people still, maybe I think it's getting better, but a lot of people will serve like boiled pasta with a bit of sauce spooned on top. And I just shudder every time I see that, because the pasta needs to like absorb some of that liquid. And also likewise, when you go to like great Italian restaurants and that sauce is like just clinging to the pasta, but every bit of it is coated. It's not watery or soupy or anything like that. That comes from those last final minutes where you're tossing everything together in the pan, and the starches from the pasta and that little bit of pasta water that you add to the pan thickens everything and makes it cling to the pasta, so it absorbs more of that flavor. And I think that is one of those keys. Also seasoning it, you got to season it a little bit more aggressively than you think you need to, because the pasta itself is not highly seasoned. And I always add a little bit of olive oil or butter at the end when I'm making pasta, because, I'm a chef and that's what we do. So, but it's really, it adds something at the end there.
I don't think you can have too much of those things. I don't think so.
Clearly, I don't think so, but I'm sure other people would disagree.
There's 3 dairy items that I thought this was a great touch at the end of the book, to kind of just give people, look, it's not that difficult. These are 3 things that you can have in your kitchen. You can make yourself that will really have multiple uses for you. And if you have them in your fridge, you can do a lot of stuff. So that's yogurt, making your own yogurt, making your own ricotta, which you discuss why it's not exactly the same as it's more like, I think East Asian people would know it's more like paneer, I think.
Yes, it's like a fresh curd. Yeah.
Right, fresh curd. And then the third thing is creme fraiche.
Yes. So these are all, and along with the potato rolls in the back section of the book that we've called projects. So these are all lots of things that are maybe a little bit more time consuming, but not necessarily more laborious. But they're kind of the things that, yes, you could buy them at the shop, but it's so much more delicious and interesting, I think, when you can make them at home. Like, I can only imagine, I'm not near my niece and nephew now, but if I showed them how to make yogurt, I think they'd be amazed, because they're so used to just opening up a packet from the refrigerator. But these are all basics, and yogurt is something I find a million uses for. So essentially the technique behind that is bringing up milk, and hopefully you have access to nice milk, bringing that up to a certain temperature to pasteurize it, then chilling it down a little bit, adding in some cultured milk or other cultured product, and then holding it at a warm temperature and letting it sit. So the most complicated part of that is finding a setup where you can hold something at that temperature for a period of 12 to 24 hours, depending on how you like the flavor. But I give some ideas on some different setups I've used over the years. And creme fraiche, interestingly enough, is like you mix a sour thing into cream and let it sit out on the counter overnight. And there you go, you get creme fraiche the next day. And ricotta, as I say, it's not classic ricotta. If you go to Italy, they make ricotta they'll make a primary cheese, and then using all the whey that comes out of that, they'll reboil that, hence the name ricotta. And that's what you get ricotta from. But I've seen videos of these guys doing it, and they have vats that are like, hundreds of gallons, and they end up with one basket of ricotta. So that's not really realistic for the home cook. So this recipe uses a bit of fresh cream and a bit of whole milk to be able to give you enough of something satisfying that it feels worth it.
Mm-hmm. I want to just close by just asking you, I know that you said that you've learned a lot this year, and I wonder if you would just be happy to pass along a couple of things that you think could be important for people to hear before we close.
Yeah. Number one, I think the slowing down has been excellent. And I think there's probably a lot of people that would agree. I never want to sound insensitive, because I do understand that a big slowdown to a lot of people has meant the loss of livelihood. And I feel really fortunate where I am. But taking a bit more time to cook at home and to really stop and enjoy that has been great for me. And then I think also learning to take it easy on myself. I think I've grown up in incredible kitchens with a lot of integrity, and I've said, I'll never use that, I'll never do that. And sometimes you just got to give yourself a break and take the shortcut where you can get it. There's a lot of principles I'll always believe in, like buying from farmers markets, buying from local farmers. But when you're in a bit of a crisis, sometimes it's just about getting dinner on the table in a way that makes you feel good and not stressed out. So I think more than anything, feeding yourself, feeding your family is the most important. What rules you stick to or don't stick to don't really matter in those moments, but there are things to consider for the future. And that's it. Take it easy on yourselves.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I think that everybody can appreciate that, because we all tend to be our own worst critics most of the time. So
no one
take
needs
it
that
easy.
right now.
No. Danielle Alvarez has been my guest on Great Taste. I didn't even introduce myself at the beginning, but that's okay. My name is Steve Boss. And you want to hold up that book again, please?
Yeah, here I am.
Okay.
Here it is.
Always add lemon. Recipes you want to cook, food you want to eat. She is the chef at Fred's in the Paddington neighborhood of Sydney, Australia. And it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for taking the time to visit.
Thank you. I so appreciate it. What a great conversation, Steve. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Great taste. Sweet. Sour. So good to taste.